Your brother has a gun. Lily Carter did not raise her voice. She did not drop the silver tray balanced against her hip. She did not look at the man standing 20 feet away beneath the crystal chandeliers. Her fingers merely adjusted the black silk tie at Dominic Moretti's collar, smoothing a wrinkle no one else could see. The polished silver tie clip caught the ballroom lights for a fraction of a second, and in that reflection she had seen it, the dark outline of a pistol hidden beneath an expensive navy jacket. Dominic Moretti did not move. For one impossible heartbeat, the most feared man in New York stared past her shoulder as if she had never spoken at all. Then his eyes lowered to her name tag. Lily. 3 hours earlier, Lily had entered the Astoria ballroom through the service corridor, not the front entrance. Staff were forbidden from using the marble staircase reserved for guests. A security guard had pointed toward a narrow hallway near the loading dock without even looking at her face. Service entrance, he said. You know the rules. Lily nodded and apologized automatically, the word leaving her mouth before she had done anything wrong. She always apologized. For standing in someone's way. For asking questions. For existing in expensive rooms where people like her were expected to disappear. The old hospital tag around her wrist had left a faint mark on her skin. She had removed it 2 weeks ago after another overnight stay with her father. Alzheimer's. The doctors said the disease was moving quickly, faster than anyone expected. Last Tuesday, he had looked directly at her and asked if she worked at the nursing home. He had forgotten she was his daughter. The memory still sat inside her chest like broken glass. Smile when serving table 12. The banquet manager instructed while handing her a tray of champagne flutes. Those people donate more money in one evening than you'll make in 10 years. The room filled slowly with senators, CEOs, judges, and men whose names never appeared in newspapers. Lily moved between them like furniture, present but unseen. At one point she stopped beside a cluster of guests gathered around Adrian Moretti, Dominic's younger brother. Adrian wore a flawless navy suit and the relaxed smile of a man accustomed to admiration. A silver-haired attorney stood beside him.
Victor Hale.
Family counsel, gatekeeper, power broker. She has the face people forget. A woman remarked softly after Lily refilled her glass. Laughter followed. Not loud. Not cruel enough to attract attention. The kind of laughter designed to leave no evidence. Victor smiled politely into his wine. That's why service staff are useful, he said. They blend into the wallpaper. More laughter. Lily kept pouring champagne, kept smiling, kept listening, because invisible people heard everything. 20 minutes later, she heard Adrian ask a question that made no sense. What time does the orchestra reach the crescendo? He asked. Victor checked his watch. Approximately 10:17. Adrian nodded once. Nothing more. Yet something about the exchange lodged itself in Lily's mind. Not the words, the precision, the way both men stopped talking when they noticed her nearby. Later, while carrying a tray past the ballroom entrance, she saw Adrian standing alone near a mirrored column. His hand slipped briefly inside his jacket. Not long enough to reveal anything. Just long enough for a small metallic shape to flash beneath the fabric before disappearing again. And now, 3 hours later, Lily stood inches from Dominic Moretti, the tie clip still cold beneath her fingertips. He had not thanked her. He had not believed her. Yet when he stepped onto the stage, his gaze drifted once toward his brother, and for the first time all evening, Adrian Moretti quietly checked his watch. It read 10:16. It read 10:16. Adrian Moretti's thumb brushed the edge of the watch face once before his hand dropped back to his side. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would make a room full of powerful people stop talking. But Lily felt the same cold sensation she had felt years earlier sitting beside her father's hospital bed, when a doctor paused before delivering bad news. The pause mattered more than the words. Around her, crystal glasses chimed softly against silverware. The orchestra continued playing beneath the chandeliers. Waiters moved, between tables carrying trays of filet mignon and wine worth more than a week's rent. Everything looked normal. That was what made it worse. Lily stepped away from the stage and forced herself to keep working. She refilled water glasses, cleared appetizer plates, smiled when spoken to, but her mind kept circling back to 10:17. 1 minute. 1 minute until whatever Adrian had planned around that exact time. Near the service corridor, she slipped through a swinging door into the kitchen. The noise hit her immediately. Industrial dishwashers hummed. Steam rose from stainless steel counters. Someone shouted for extra bread service. For a few seconds it felt like another world. Safe. Ordinary. Then her phone vibrated inside her apron pocket. The screen was cracked across one corner from when it had slipped off a hospital chair 3 months earlier. A medication reminder for her father flashed across the lock screen. Below it sat a newer notification she didn't recognize. An image backup had completed automatically. Lily frowned. She opened the gallery while balancing a stack of folded linen napkins. There it was. The accidental photograph she'd taken earlier when inventory staff handed her the wrong suit jacket. At the time, she'd only wanted a record of the misplaced belongings in case someone accused her of stealing. Now she zoomed in. The photo wasn't good. Half the frame showed wrinkled fabric. A hotel key card peeked from an inside pocket. Parking receipt. A folded note. But something else sat partly hidden behind the receipt. Another card. Not a room key. Black. Matte. Unmarked except for a small silver symbol in one corner. Lily enlarged the image again. Security access. The kind used for restricted areas. Her stomach tightened. The ballroom wasn't the only place inside the hotel. There were maintenance corridors, electrical rooms, catwalks above the stage, places cameras rarely covered. You lost. The voice came from behind her. Lily nearly dropped the phone. Victor Hale stood in the doorway holding a cup of coffee. He smiled politely. Perfect teeth. Perfect posture. Perfect control. No, sir. She locked the screen. Just checking a message. Family? He asked. My father. I see. His expression softened with practiced sympathy. Illness is expensive. I hope you're managing. Something about the way he said it made her skin crawl. Not because the words were cruel. Because they sounded rehearsed. Like a man selecting the correct emotion from a shelf. We're getting by. Victor nodded slowly. Good. Loyalty should always be rewarded. Then he walked away. Lily stood still long after he disappeared. Loyalty. The word lingered strangely. 5 minutes later she returned to the ballroom. The orchestra had reached the final movement. Guests applauded between courses. Dominic Moretti remained near the stage, speaking quietly with 2 men from his security team. His face revealed nothing. Yet Lily noticed something others missed. One of the security men handed Dominic a phone. Dominic looked at the screen for less than 2 seconds before returning it. No reaction. No visible change. But his gaze moved once toward the west side of the ballroom. Toward the security camera mounted above the exit doors. Then he asked a single question. Softly. Calmly. The kind of question that made grown men straighten their backs. Why is camera 12 offline? Nobody answered immediately. Silence spread wider than shouting ever could. Later, when Lily passed the hostess station, she noticed a printed seating chart left beside a wine bucket. Table numbers. Guest names. Last-minute changes. At first glance, everything looked routine. Then she saw Adrian Moretti's assigned seat crossed out in blue ink. His replacement table was listed only 20 minutes before the event began. Directly beside the words was a handwritten note. 10:17 confirmed. 10:17 confirmed. Lily stared at the handwritten note until a server brushed past her shoulder carrying a tray of red wine. The seating chart fluttered slightly in the draft from the ballroom doors, and for a second she wondered if she had imagined it. Maybe every gala used timing notes. Maybe every powerful family moved guests around at the last minute. Maybe she was connecting dots that weren't connected. Then she noticed the initials beside the change.
Veha Victor Hale.
Her pulse quickened. The orchestra swelled toward another movement while conversations rolled through the ballroom like distant waves. Nobody else appeared concerned. Nobody else was looking at the seating chart. Lily folded a linen napkin over the paper and quietly slipped a photo with her old phone before returning the chart exactly where she had found it. The phone vibrated again. Not a text this time. A low storage warning. She almost laughed. Her entire life seemed to fit inside that cracked device. Hospital bills. Pharmacy reminders. Voice messages from doctors. Pictures of her father before the disease took pieces of him away. She shoved the phone back into her apron and moved toward table 7 carrying a fresh bottle of Bordeaux. Halfway there she slowed. Adrian Moretti was no longer seated. His chair sat empty beside a half-finished glass of wine. Victor remained at the table, smiling at a state senator while rotating his coffee cup slowly between both hands. Lily set down the bottle and reached for the empty wine glass. The stem was still warm. He had left recently. Very recently. As she turned away, Victor's voice drifted across the table. The timing has been adjusted. He said it casually as if discussing weather. The senator nodded. Good. Last-minute changes can be dangerous. Victor smiled. Only when people notice them. Lily kept walking. She forced herself not to look back. In the service hallway, she pushed through a pair of swinging doors and nearly collided with one of Dominic Moretti's security men. The man muttered an apology and continued past. What caught her attention wasn't him. It was the keycard clipped to his jacket. Black, matte, identical to the one she had seen in the photograph. Lily stopped cold. Restricted access. The same symbol. The same silver corner marking. Her stomach tightened. A coincidence once. Twice felt different. She followed the hallway to the service elevators where carts of clean glassware waited beneath fluorescent lights. A housekeeping employee was arguing quietly with maintenance near a control panel. Neither noticed her. On the wall beside them hung a security monitor.
12 camera fix.
Except one square remained black.
Camera 12.
The same camera Dominic had asked about. Lily stepped closer. The timestamp on the offline screen froze at 9:42 p.m. The current time was nearly 10:20. 38 minutes missing. She memorized it. 38 minutes. Not 10. Not 5. 38. A maintenance worker finally noticed her standing there. Can I help you? He asked sharply. Lily smiled and apologized out of habit. Then she left before he could ask more questions. When she returned to the ballroom, Dominic Moretti stood alone near the rear column, appearing to study nothing in particular. Yet his eyes found her immediately, not warmly, not suspiciously, differently, as if she had become a problem he couldn't categorize. Lily hesitated, then crossed the room. Mr. Moretti. His gaze dropped briefly to the tray in her hands. You should be working. I am. The answer slipped out before fear could stop it. Something flickered in his expression. Not approval. Recognition. He waited. Lily lowered her voice. Camera 12 has been offline since 9:42. Silence followed. Heavy. Deliberate. Dominic did not thank her. He did not react. Instead he asked one quiet question. Who told you to look? Nobody. Another silence. Longer this time. Then he glanced toward the orchestra and away again. Go back to work, Lily. Not waitress. Not miss. Lily. It should have reassured her. Somehow it did the opposite. Because as she turned to leave, she noticed Victor Hale across the ballroom watching them both. And the moment their eyes met, Victor calmly slipped a second black key card into his pocket. Victor Hale calmly slipped a second black key card into his pocket. The gesture lasted less than a second. Most people would have missed it. Lily almost wished she had. Instead, the image stayed with her as she crossed the ballroom carrying a tray of champagne flutes that suddenly felt twice as heavy. Crystal chandeliers poured warm gold across the room. A string quartet played near the stage. Men worth hundreds of millions of dollars laughed over bourbon and campaign donations. Everything looked elegant. Everything looked safe. That was the problem. Dangerous things never announced themselves in rooms like this. They wore tailored suits and spoke in measured voices. A hand touched her elbow. Miss Carter. Lily turned. One of the hotel's senior security supervisors stood beside her. mid-50s, immaculate suit, silver tie, professional smile. Would you come with me for a moment? His tone was polite enough to make refusal sound unreasonable. He led her into a private conference room off the ballroom corridor. Thick carpet swallowed sound. Mahogany walls reflected soft lamplight. Through the glass, she could still see guests moving between tables. Inside the room sat Victor Hale, a woman from the charity board, the banquet director. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody looked angry. Somehow that made it worse. Victor stood when she entered. Lily. His smile appeared warm, practiced. Please sit. She remained standing. Victor's smile didn't change. One of our security officers mentioned you've expressed concerns about certain guests. Lily tightened her grip on the edge of her serving tray. I reported something unusual. Of course. Victor folded his hands. And we're grateful. Truly. The charity board member nodded sympathetically. Large events can be overwhelming. Lily knew that tone. She had heard doctors use it when speaking to exhausted families in hospital waiting rooms. Gentle, reasonable, dismissive. Camera 12 was offline, she said, and someone changed the seating assignments minutes before the event. Victor chuckled softly, not mocking. Worse, amused. Hotels experience technical issues every day. 38 minutes isn't a technical issue. The room grew quieter. The banquet director shifted slightly in his chair. Victor studied her for a moment. You seem very certain. I wrote down the time. Ah. Victor nodded as if she'd confirmed something important. You care about details. Someone should. The words escaped before she could stop them. For the first time, Victor's smile thinned. Only slightly. Miss Carter, he said gently. Your dedication is admirable, but sometimes staff members mistake proximity for understanding. Seeing part of a conversation isn't the same as understanding it. Lily recognized the knife hidden. Inside the compliment. Staff members. Not people. Not witnesses. Furniture. Wallpaper. Useful until they became inconvenient. The charity board member slid a form across the table. We simply want to avoid confusion. This states that your observations were speculative and made under stress. Lily looked down. One signature. One sentence. Everything disappears. She thought about her father sitting beside a nursing home window asking strangers whether his daughter would visit today. She thought about apologizing her entire life. She placed the tray carefully on the conference table, straightened her name tag, then pushed the paper back untouched. I'm not signing something I know isn't true. Silence followed. Victor's eyes settled on her for several seconds. No anger. No threat. Just calculation. Then he smiled again. Of course not. The supervisor escorted her back toward the ballroom. As she stepped through the doors, she saw Dominic Moretti standing across the room. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the unsigned form still visible through the conference room glass. And when Victor emerged moments later, he greeted Dominic with his usual effortless composure. Almost, because for the first time all evening, Victor shook the wrong hand. He reached toward Dominic's right side before correcting himself. Tiny mistake. Except Lily remembered seeing the second black key card disappear into Victor's left pocket. Victor reached toward Dominic's right side before correcting himself. Tiny mistake. So small that nobody else appeared to notice it. The orchestra played on. Glasses clinked. Conversations resumed. Yet Dominic Moretti's eyes lingered on Victor for half a second longer than necessary. Then he walked away without a word. Lily told herself it meant nothing. Powerful men noticed everything. That didn't mean they cared. She returned to work, refilled drinks, cleared plates, smiled when spoken to. But the pressure inside the ballroom felt different now, like a storm building behind expensive walls. 20 minutes later, she found herself back near the service elevators. Not because she was looking for trouble, because one of the banquet captains had sent her to retrieve additional wine menus from storage. The hallway was empty except for the distant hum of ventilation fans. Bright fluorescent lights reflected off polished concrete floors. As Lily passed a housekeeping cart, something caught her eye beneath a stack of folded towels. A folded sheet of paper. Ordinary, except she recognized the black hotel logo printed across the top. The same logo from the parking receipt she'd photographed earlier. She crouched quickly and pulled it free. Not a receipt. A vehicle access log. 3 entries highlighted in yellow marker. 1 license plate. 1 parking garage level. 1 arrival time. 9:42 p.m. The exact minute camera 12 had gone offline. Lily's pulse jumped. She folded the paper and slipped it into her apron just as footsteps approached. Adrian Moretti appeared from the far end of the corridor. His expression remained relaxed. Friendly even. "There you are," he said. Lily straightened immediately. "Sir." Adrian smiled. Hands in his pockets. Effortless. Dangerous in the way only charming people could be. "Victor tells me you've been very observant tonight." Lily said nothing. Adrian's smile widened slightly. "It's a gift. Most people never notice anything." He stepped closer. Not threatening. Not enough to justify fear. "The problem with noticing things is that eventually you start seeing patterns that aren't there. Maybe. You take care of your father, don't you?" The words hit harder than they should have. Lily felt the blood drain from her face. Adrian noticed. Of course he noticed. "Medical care is expensive," he continued gently. "Especially long-term memory care. It would be a shame if stress affected your work." There it was. Not a threat. Not technically. Just concern wrapped around a knife. Lily looked directly at him. "My father taught me not to lie." For the first time, Adrian's smile faltered. Only slightly. Then it returned. "Good advice." He walked away. Lily remained still until he disappeared around the corner. Her hands were shaking now. Not from fear. From certainty. By the time she returned to the ballroom, Dominic stood alone near the rear balcony overlooking the city lights. Manhattan glittered beyond the glass like scattered diamonds. Nobody approached him without permission. Lily hesitated, then crossed the room anyway. Dominic watched the skyline. "You keep finding things," he said quietly before she spoke. Lily removed the folded parking log from her apron. "I didn't find it by accident." Dominic finally looked at her. She handed him the paper. He read it once, then again. Silence stretched between them, longer than before, longer than normal. His thumb stopped on the highlighted timestamp. 9:42 p.m. Lily watched something change behind his eyes. Not belief. Not yet. Recognition. "What's wrong?" she asked. Dominic didn't answer immediately. Instead, he folded the paper with careful precision, the same way someone handles evidence. Then he said, 3 years ago, I created a rule." His voice remained calm. "Only 4 people were authorized to disable a security camera in any property I own." Lily swallowed. 4. Dominic nodded once. His gaze drifted across the ballroom until it settled on Victor Hale laughing beside a group of donors. "And Victor wrote the list himself. And Victor wrote the list himself." Dominic's gaze remained fixed across the ballroom. Victor was still smiling, still shaking hands, still playing the role he had perfected over the years. The trusted advisor, the steady voice, the man who always knew where every contract was buried and every problem could be made to disappear. Dominic folded the parking log once more and slipped it into the inside pocket of his jacket. "Go back to work," he said quietly. Lily hesitated. "That's it." His eyes shifted toward her. Not angry, not dismissive, just unreadable. "For now." Then he walked away. No dramatic orders. No security sweep. No confrontation. Somehow that frightened her more. The rest of the ballroom continued as if nothing had changed. Donors laughed. Politicians traded favors. Crystal glasses caught the light. Yet an invisible current seemed to move beneath everything now. Dominic spent the next 40 minutes doing exactly what everyone expected him to do. He greeted guests, signed a charity pledge, posed for photographs. But he also noticed things. Small things. Dangerous things. At 10:58 p.m., He quietly requested a copy of the hotel's camera maintenance logs. At 11:04, he asked his private attorney for records regarding all temporary security overrides issued during the event. At 11:11, he requested employee access reports going back 6 months. He never raised his voice, never explained why. People obeyed because they always had. Meanwhile, Lily found herself back in the service corridor near midnight. The gala was beginning to wind down. Dirty plates stacked beside industrial sinks. The dish machine hummed steadily. Water sprayed against steel. For a few minutes, the sound felt almost comforting. Ordinary. She stood alone near a prep counter staring at a folded hospital invoice sticking out of her apron pocket. The payment reminder had arrived that morning. Past due. Again. Her father needed another specialist consultation next month. She didn't know how she would afford it. The paper felt heavy in her hand. Not because of the amount owed. Because people like Victor always seemed to know exactly how much pressure to apply. She folded it carefully and returned it to her pocket. When Dominic found her 20 minutes later, she was polishing water glasses. "Miss Carter." She turned. "Mr. Moretti." He glanced at the invoice corner still visible in her apron. "Victor offered to help with your father's care?" Lily blinked. "How did you know?" Dominic didn't answer immediately. Silence settled between them. Then she understood. Of course he knew. Men like Dominic survived by learning how power moved through people. "I don't want money," she said quietly. "I never asked for money." Dominic studied her face. "Then what do you want?" The answer came faster than she expected. "I want people to stop using hospital bills to make others stay quiet." The dish machine shut off behind them. Suddenly the room felt much quieter. Dominic said nothing, but something shifted. Not in his expression, in the absence of one. The kind of stillness that comes before a storm changes direction. His phone vibrated. One message. One attachment. He opened it. Security override records. For authorized names. Exactly as he remembered. His own. His chief of security. Adrian Moretti.
Victor Hale.
Then he noticed something else. A second page attached accidentally. Expense reimbursement records. Normally he would have ignored it. Tonight he didn't. One line item caught his eye immediately. Monthly charitable fund disbursement. Alzheimer's Care Initiative. Approved by Victor Hale. Amount released, $250,000. Amount received by program, $81,000. Dominic read the numbers twice. Then a third time. The missing funds stretched back almost 3 years. 3 years. The same period during which Victor had personally overseen the charity. The same period during which families like Lily's had been told resources were limited. Dominic slowly lowered the phone. Across the room, Lily continued polishing a glass, unaware of what he was seeing. She looked exhausted, underpaid, invisible. Yet she had handed him more truth in one evening than some of his closest advisors had given him in years. Dominic stared at the numbers again. Then he remembered something that suddenly felt very different. 3 years ago, when questions had first surfaced about missing charitable funds, Victor had been the one who convinced him the accounting department was at fault. 3 years ago, when questions had first surfaced about missing charitable funds, Victor had been the one who convinced him the accounting department was at fault. Dominic stared at the message for several more seconds before locking his phone. The dish room hummed back to life. Water sprayed against steel. Somewhere down the corridor, a tray crashed and someone cursed under their breath. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary mistakes. The kind that happened every day. The difference was that Dominic suddenly found himself wondering how many other mistakes had never been mistakes at all. He slipped the phone into his pocket. "Miss Carter." Lily looked up from the glass she was polishing. "Yes. Do you remember the seating chart?" She nodded immediately. Table assignments changed at 9:51. Dominic's expression didn't move. "How do you know?" "The hostess complained about reprinting place cards while I was restocking champagne." A pause. "She said she missed her daughter's bedtime. Because of it." Dominic studied her quietly. Most people remembered important people. Lily remembered times, conversations, tiny details nobody else thought mattered. What color folder was the revised chart in? She blinked. Dark blue. Not black.
No.
You're sure? Yes. Dominic nodded once. That was all. Yet something in his eyes hardened. Thank you. Lily watched him walk away and realized he hadn't asked those questions because he doubted her. He had asked because he was building something. An hour later, the gala had thinned considerably. Most donors had left. Remaining guests gathered in smaller circles around the ballroom. The orchestra had packed up. Soft jazz now drifted through hidden speakers. The room felt quieter, more dangerous. Dominic sat with Adrian and Victor in a private lounge overlooking the ballroom floor. A bottle of 30-year-old scotch rested unopened on the table between them. 3 glasses, none touched. The city glowed through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind them. Long night, Adrian said casually. Successful one. Dominic nodded. Very. Victor relaxed into his chair. The charity numbers exceeded expectations. Did they? Dominic asked. Victor smiled. By a wide margin. Silence followed. Adrian reached for his glass but stopped halfway. Dominic didn't seem interested in the drink. He was looking at a blue folder lying upside down on the table. The same dark blue used by event management. Funny thing happened tonight, Dominic said. His voice remained calm. Adrian chuckled lightly. Something always happens at these events. Dominic turned the folder over. Inside sat several documents. Seating revisions. Security overrides. Vendor authorizations. Nothing alarming. Yet neither Adrian nor Victor knew exactly which pages Dominic had seen. That uncertainty began doing the work for him. Camera 12 failed at 9:42, Dominic said. Victor answered immediately. Too quickly. Hotel maintenance already explained that. Dominic looked at him. I didn't ask for an explanation. Silence. Victor smiled again. Smaller this time. Of course. Dominic removed a single page and slid it across the table. Humor me. Adrian glanced. Down. A revised seating authorization form. What's this? Dominic asked. Adrian barely looked at it. Looks like event paperwork. It is. Dominic folded his hands. Who approved it? Victor answered. I did. Again too quickly. Dominic waited. Nothing else. Just waited. The silence stretched. Adrian finally reached for the page and frowned. That isn't your signature. Victor's eyes flicked toward him. Fast. Almost invisible. But Dominic saw it. So did Lily. She stood across the ballroom replacing linen on an empty dessert table. Close enough to watch expressions if not hear every word. Adrian looked down again. Your signature loops left. This one loops right. Victor laughed softly. People forge signatures all the time. On event paperwork? Adrian asked. Apparently. Dominic said nothing. That frightened Victor more than anger would have. The attorney leaned back. Composed. Controlled. Yet his fingers tapped once against the armrest. Twice. Then stopped. Across the room, Lily suddenly remembered something. The blue folder. The hostess. The complaint. She abandoned the linen and hurried toward the service station. A minute later she returned holding a discarded print order ticket from the event office. Small. Wrinkled. Easy to overlook. The timestamp read 9:51 p.m. The reprint request wasn't submitted by event management. It had been submitted using Victor Hale's personal authorization code. Across the lounge, Victor finally looked up from the documents and saw Lily walking toward Dominic with the ticket in her hand. For the first time that night, the smile disappeared completely. For the first time that night, the smile disappeared completely. Victor Hale stopped walking. Across the ballroom, conversations continued for another few seconds before fading one table at a time. People sensed shifts in power long before they understood them. Dominic accepted the wrinkled print ticket from Lily without a word. The paper looked insignificant in his hand. A discarded office slip. Nothing more. Yet every clue from the night seemed to lead back to it. The parking log. The altered seating chart.
Camera 12.
The black keycards. Victor's authorization code. Dominic unfolded the ticket slowly. His eyes moved across the timestamp. 9:51 p.m. Then to the authorization line beneath it.
Victor Hale.
No one spoke. Adrian rose from his chair first. This proves he reordered seating, he said carefully. Not murder. Victor recovered enough to nod. Exactly. Event logistics change constantly. His voice sounded steady again. Almost convincing. Almost. Dominic looked at neither man. Instead he turned to Lily. What else? The question landed heavily in the silence. Lily swallowed. Her heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat. Around them stood senators, donors, executives, judges, people who would never remember the name of a waitress. Yet every eye in the room was suddenly on her. She reached into her apron pocket. The photo. Dominic extended his hand. Lily gave him the old phone. The cracked screen reflected the ballroom lights. He opened the image she had taken hours earlier. The misplaced jacket. The black keycard. The parking receipt. The folded note. This time he zoomed further. Then further still. The image blurred. Pixelated. Distorted. But not enough. A line of numbers appeared on the corner of the folded paper. Dominic froze. His face changed. Not dramatically. Worse. The way a man's face changes when a memory suddenly becomes evidence. Bring up the donor transfer records, he said quietly. No one moved at first. Then his chief financial officer hurried toward a laptop station near the stage. Victor's composure cracked by a fraction. Dominic. Not now. The room fell silent again. Within minutes, a projection screen descended from the ballroom ceiling. Financial records appeared. Charitable transfers. Foundation payments. Grant distributions. Hundreds of transactions. Dominic pointed at a sequence number visible on the photograph. The CFO searched, then stopped. Found it. His voice sounded thin. 3 years ago. Another screen appeared. Alzheimer's Care Initiative. Emergency Reserve Account. Transfer authorized by Victor Hale. Destination account unknown. Amount. $169,000. A murmur moved through the room. Victor opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. There is an explanation. Dominic finally looked at him. The expression in his eyes made several people glance away. Good. Victor straightened. Because that's not the full record. Then show me the full record. Silence. Dominic waited. Nothing more.
No shouting. No threats.
Just silence. The kind that forced truth to stand alone. Victor did not move. Adrian slowly lowered himself back into his chair. Lily watched realization spread across faces throughout the ballroom. People who had laughed at her, ignored her, dismissed her. The evidence was no longer coming from a waitress. It was coming from their own records. Dominic's gaze drifted toward the giant charity banner hanging above the stage bearing his family name. For a moment he seemed unable to look away from it. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before. Families trusted my name. Nobody answered. Dominic looked at Lily. Then at the hospital invoice corner still visible inside her apron pocket. Then back at Victor. The betrayal had become larger than money. Larger than one night. Larger than one attempted crime. It had lived beneath his roof for years. Dominic removed the parking log from his jacket. Placed it beside the print ticket. Then set Lily's phone on top of both. 3 small objects. Enough to break an empire's illusion. He turned toward his chief counsel, removed his glasses, and spoke in a voice so calm it chilled the room. Call my attorney. Call my attorney. No one moved for a second. The words were not loud. They did not need to be. In rooms built on power, the quietest decisions were often the ones that changed lives. Victor Hale looked as though he wanted to speak, to explain, to negotiate, to remind everyone of the years he had spent protecting the Moretti name. But the moment had already passed. Dominic turned away from him. That hurt more than any accusation. By sunrise, The board of the Moretti Foundation had voted unanimously to suspend Victor's authority over every charitable account. Independent auditors were brought in. Federal investigators received copies of the financial records. Several trustees resigned before anyone asked them to. Adrian was removed from succession discussions pending the investigation. No dramatic arrests happened in the ballroom.
No handcuffs. No shouting.
Just signatures, votes, records. The slow machinery of consequences finally moving in the right direction. 3 weeks later, the charity released a public statement acknowledging years of financial mismanagement. Families who had been denied assistance were contacted directly. Claims were reopened. Funding was restored. Names that had disappeared into filing cabinets were entered back into the system, including one particular name, Lily Carter. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, she sat in a specialist's office beside her father while a case manager reviewed updated coverage approvals. The stack of unpaid invoices that had once lived in her kitchen drawer was gone. Not erased, not hidden, paid through the program that should have helped them years earlier. The case manager smiled. Everything is active now. Lily stared at the paperwork for several seconds before answering. She had spent so long fighting every bill, every delay, every rejection that relief felt unfamiliar. Her father sat beside her looking out the window at the rain sliding down the glass. Some days he remembered more than others. Some days he didn't remember much at all. Life wasn't magically fixed. Healing never worked that way. But for the first time in years, survival was no longer the only plan. 2 months after the gala, Dominic visited the foundation headquarters. Changes had been made throughout the organization. Independent oversight, open audits, employee reporting protections, a new policy requiring every complaint to be documented and reviewed regardless of job title. Receptionists, janitors, kitchen staff, volunteers, everyone. The old system had depended on certain people being invisible. Dominic intended to make that impossible. Later that afternoon, he stopped by the restaurant where Lily had accepted a management training position funded through the foundation's workforce program. Not a favor, a job she had earned. The lunch rush had just ended. Coffee scented the air. Silverware clinked softly in the background. Lily stood behind the counter reviewing inventory sheets. She looked up when the door opened. Dominic placed a small box on the counter between them. "Something belongs to you." Lily opened it carefully. Inside rested the silver tie clip, the same one that had reflected a hidden truth on the night everything changed. For a moment neither spoke. At the beginning of the story it had reflected a gun, a threat, a secret. Now it reflected sunlight from the front window. "You should keep it," she said softly. Dominic shook his head.
No.
His voice carried the same weight it always had. "You saw what everyone else missed." Lily looked down at the tie clip, then at the old phone still sitting beside the register. Cracked screen, worn edges. She could have replaced it months ago. She never had. It reminded her that truth did not always arrive from powerful people. Sometimes it arrived through the hands of someone nobody bothered to notice. Dominic's eyes drifted toward her employee badge clipped neatly to her jacket. The name was printed correctly. Lily Carter.
No misspellings. No shortcuts.
No invisible woman standing against the wall. "Thank you," he said. Lily smiled slightly. "For what?" Dominic looked around the quiet restaurant, then back at her. "For refusing to disappear." After he left, the afternoon settled into an ordinary kind of peace. Coffee steamed from a fresh mug beside the register. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Lily placed the tie clip beside her old phone and returned to work. Not because the world had suddenly become fair, but because the truth had finally been written down, her name had finally been spoken, and the people who once looked through her had finally learned to listen.